The Marines and the Army's Wildcats were prepared to storm the beaches of Peleliu and Angaur and confront the deeply entrenched Japanese forces. Despite their readiness, they had to wait nearly a week before they could disembark. In the meantime, they watched as the mighty Tennessee-class battleship, with its formidable battery of 12 14-inch Mark IV guns, relentlessly shelled the island. The Navy had been bombarding the area for over 4 days, systematically destroying bunkers, tunnels, mines, and Japanese defenses. The Tennessee struck with brutal precision, and many of the young men believed there were no Japanese left on the island when they received orders to prepare for combat on September 17, 1944. But they were mistaken. The enemy was still there, concealed in the jungle. As the United States prepared for war against the Prussian Empire, the Navy commissioned a new class of battleships, drawing inspiration from the New Mexico class. This new design was known simply as Battleship 1916. The Navy's General Board aimed to depart from conventional designs, introducing improvements in armor, firepower, and propulsion. The Tennessee-class battleship design was approved in March 1915, and construction began almost immediately on 2 ships, the USS Tennessee and the USS California. Each vessel measured 600 feet in length, had a beam of 97 feet, and a draft of 30 feet, displacing over 33,000 long tons when fully loaded for combat. These ships featured 4 torpedo bulkheads to withstand underwater attacks and absorb explosive pressure and gases. They were also built with a clipper bow to handle rough seas and reduce spray. The Tennessee class included extensive compartmentalization, with over 760 compartments below the waterline and around 180 above it, minimizing the risk of flooding. Propelled by turboelectric drives, the ships had 8 oil-fired boilers, 2 Westinghouse turboelectric generators, and 4 electric motors, powering for 3-bladed screws. This system produced over 28,000 shaft horsepower, giving the battleships a top speed of 21 knots. Their cruising range was 8,000 miles at 10 knots. Extendable to more than 20,000 miles with increased fuel capacity. The standard crew consisted of 57 officers and 1,026 enlisted men. In addition to their durability, these ships were heavily armed. The USS Tennessee was equipped with 12 14-inch Mark IV guns housed in 4 triple turrets. Each barrel could elevate independently, with a maximum elevation of 30 degrees for long-range fire. These guns could fire 1,500-pound armor-piercing shells up to 35,000 yards, or 1,275-pound. High-capacity shells up to 36,650 yards. The ship's secondary battery included 14 5-inch guns, with 6 facing forward, 4 aft, and 4 in open. Mounts near the conning tower and funnels. Anti-aircraft defense consisted of 4 Mark X 3-inch guns, and the ship also carried 2 21-inch torpedo tubes fitted with Mark VII Bliss-Levitt torpedoes, capable of reaching 12,000 yards. The Tennessee had an armored belt between 8 and 13 inches thick and nearly 18 feet wide, reinforced by 13.5-inch thick transverse bulkheads. Her main battery turrets had 18-inch thick faces, 10-inch sides, 9-inch rears, and 5-inch roofs. The conning towers featured 16-inch sides and 6-inch roofs, and the armored funnel uptakes were 9 inches thick. Her formidable armament would soon face its greatest test. Launched in April 1919, the USS Tennessee participated in numerous training exercises throughout the 1920s and 1930s. In early 1941, with tensions rising with Japan, she was transferred to the Pacific. She was moored along Battleship Row when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. Trapped by nearby damaged vessels, her crew swiftly manned anti-aircraft guns to fight off the attackers. Although hit twice, the bombs failed to detonate. Despite some disabled guns and small fires, the Tennessee survived and was subsequently repaired and modernized. Upgrades included air search and fire control radars, enhanced anti-aircraft batteries, and an expanded crew of 114 officers, and over 2,000 men. In June 1943, Tennessee joined Task Force 16 to support the Aleutian Islands campaign. aiding in the recapture of Kiska and Aitu from the Japanese. During the pre-invasion bombardment of Kiska, she fired 14-inch shells at what was believed to be an enemy submarine, although its sinking was never confirmed. She later covered the amphibious landings on Little Kiska Island, where her crew discovered the Japanese had withdrawn days earlier. Tennessee continued her role in the Pacific campaigns, arriving at the Gilbert Islands in November 1943 as U.S. Marines advanced on the beaches and pushed back Japanese forces. Tennessee and her sister ship Colorado opened fire to destroy the entrenched enemy. The Marines and the Army's Wildcats were fully prepared to storm the beaches of Peleliu and Angaur, ready to confront the deeply dug-in Japanese forces. Despite their eagerness, they were forced to wait nearly a week before they could land. During that time, all they could do was watch the powerful Tennessee-class battleship unleash wave after wave of destruction on the island. With its 12, 14-inch Mark IV guns, the ship continuously hammered Japanese positions, flattening defenses and clearing bunkers, tunnels, and minefields. The Navy's bombardment lasted more than 4 days, striking with deadly precision. Many of the young soldiers began to believe there were no Japanese left alive on the island by the time they received orders to prepare for combat on September 17, 1944. But the enemy was still there, waiting deep in the jungle. As the United States entered the First World War against the Prussian Empire, the Navy planned a new type of warship inspired by the earlier New Mexico class. This new class was simply called Battleship 1916. The Navy's General Board wanted to break away from standard ship design by introducing stronger armor, more powerful guns, and a better power plant. The Tennessee-class battleship design was approved in March 1915, and construction on 2 vessels began almost immediately. These were the USS Tennessee and the USS California. Each ship was 600 feet long, with a 97-foot beam and a 30-foot draft, displacing over 33,000 long tons at full combat load. To defend against underwater attacks. The ships had 4 torpedo bulkheads that absorbed explosive force and pressure. They were built with clipper bows to manage rough seas and minimize spray over the deck. The design also included an extensive internal compartment system with over 760 compartments below the waterline and about 180 above, helping reduce the risk of flooding. These battleships used turboelectric propulsion, with 8 oil-fired boilers, 2 Westinghouse turboelectric generators, and 4 electric motors, driving for 3-bladed screws. This produced more than 28,000 shaft horsepower, giving them a top speed of 21 knots. Their cruising range was 8,000 miles at 10 knots and could exceed 20,000 miles. With added fuel capacity, the typical crew included 57 officers and 1,026 enlisted personnel. The USS Tennessee was heavily armed and built for serious combat. Her main battery consisted of 12 14-inch Mark IV guns arranged in 4 triple turrets. Each barrel could elevate on its own, up to 30 degrees for long-range targeting. These guns could fire 1,500-pound armor-piercing shells as far as 35,000 yards. Or 1,275-pound high-capacity shells up to 36,650 yards. The secondary battery included 14 5-inch guns, with 6 aimed forward, 4 to the rear, and 4 mounted in open positions near the conning tower and funnels. For anti-aircraft defense, she carried 4 3-inch guns and 2 21-inch torpedo tubes that launched Mark VII Bliss-Levitt torpedoes, which had a range of 12,000 yards. Her armor was formidable. The main belt ranged from 8 to 13 inches thick and was nearly 18 feet wide. Transverse bulkheads capped the belt with 13.5-inch armor. The main gun turrets had 18-inch faces, 10-inch sides, 9-inch rears, and 5-inch roofs. The conning towers were protected by 16-inch side armor and 6-inch roofs. Even the funnel uptakes were reinforced with 9-inch armor. These features made the ship a powerful force, and she would soon be tested in combat. Launched in April 1919, the USS Tennessee took part in many training exercises during the 1920s and 1930s, As tensions with Japan rose in early 1941, she was stationed in the Pacific. On December 7, 1941, she was moored at Battleship Row during the attack on Pearl Harbor. Nearby ships were badly damaged, leaving Tennessee boxed in. Her crew quickly manned anti-aircraft guns and fired back during the assault. Although she was struck by 2 bombs, neither exploded. Some of her guns were disabled, and small fires broke out, but she survived. In the months following the attack, she underwent repairs and a major modernization. Upgrades included air search and fire control radars, more advanced anti-aircraft weapons, and an expanded crew of 114 officers and more than 2,000 enlisted men. By June 1943, she joined Task Force 16 to support the Aleutian Islands campaign. She helped recapture Kiska and Attu from the Japanese, bombarding enemy positions and even targeting what was thought to be a submarine, although no sinking was confirmed. Later, she supported landings on Little Kiska Island, only to find the Japanese had already evacuated days earlier. In November 1943, Tennessee reached the Gilbert Islands to assist U.S. Marines fighting their way inland. As the ground troops advanced, she and the USS Colorado opened fire to destroy Japanese strongholds and support the beach landings with overwhelming firepower. The Marines fought their way ashore, while the USS Tennessee supported them from offshore. During the fierce fighting at Tarawa, the ship would leave the combat zone at night to avoid potential submarine attacks, but remained ready to provide and direct fire support whenever the Marines needed it. During the battle, the ship scored several hits on a Japanese submarine and sank it. In early January 1944, the Tennessee received a new coat of dazzle camouflage before setting off for the Marshall Islands. At the Kwajalein Atoll, the Tennessee joined other Navy ships in bombarding Japanese positions. Their fire destroyed pillboxes, underground tunnels, and defensive structures near the beaches. The ship's floatplanes were launched to spot additional enemy strongholds, which were then targeted accurately by the ship's guns. This support allowed the Marines to enter the jungle with significantly less resistance. Once Kwajalein was secured, the Tennessee moved on to support the assault on another atoll. She took part in a preliminary bombardment, helping mark positions for assault craft using her secondary battery. The ship continued to fire until February 22, leaving most of the island in ruins. Very few structures remained standing as the Tennessee's heavy guns left a clear mark of destruction. In March 1944, the Tennessee was sent to the Bismarck Archipelago to destroy Japanese bases in the area. By June, she arrived in the Mariana Islands to take part in the Battle of Saipan. Her guns once again opened up, eliminating many Japanese beach defenses. Artillery and mortar positions were suppressed, and minesweepers received cover fire as they cleared paths for landing craft. As the Marines secured Saipan, Tennessee was called upon in July to support the capture of Tinian and Guam. From a range of about 2,500 yards, Tennessee and other vessels provided heavy fire to protect the Marines landing on Tinian. Tennessee and her sister ship California bombarded the town with more than 500 rounds, forcing the Japanese to retreat into tunnel systems. After refueling, the Tennessee headed for the Palau Islands to take part in operations aiming to capture strategic airfields. These airfields would later be used by B-24 bombers to launch attacks on the Philippines. The responsibility for capturing Peleliu was assigned to the 1st Marine Division, while the task of taking Angaur went to the Army's 81st Infantry Division, known as the Wildcats. On September 16, 1944, the Marines landed on Peleliu to face Colonel Kunio Nakagawa's force of 11,000 men. The fighting was intense from the outset, and the Marines suffered heavy losses. The following day, the Wildcats prepared for their assault on Angaur. Before they landed, the Tennessee, along with the USS Pennsylvania, 5 destroyers, and 4 cruisers, unleashed a heavy bombardment. The Wildcats, numbering over 10,000, went up against roughly 1,400 Japanese soldiers, led by Lieutenant General Sadai Inoue and Major Oshio Goto of the 59th Infantry Regiment, 14th Infantry Division. These Japanese troops, were experienced fighters from previous campaigns in Manchuria, and were determined to fight to the death in service of the emperor. Before the battle, Major General Paul J. Mueller addressed his men, telling them that they were on the verge of capturing a vital strategic area, and that their efforts would be a significant contribution to their country's success. Major Goto had focused his defenses on the likely landing areas, bracing for the American assault as Tennessee pounded the island with her main guns. The Wildcats landed without major difficulty, but once they advanced inland, they encountered fierce resistance. The outnumbered Japanese did their best to slow the American advance, but lacked the supplies and manpower to hold out for long. Throughout the battle, the Tennessee continued to provide supporting fire. War correspondent John Walker reported hearing the thunder of the big guns and described the sound of the shells overhead, along with the sight of the warships, surrounded by smoke and flame. On September 20th, the island was declared secure. Allowing the Tennessee to leave and refuel, U.S. forces immediately began constructing airfields, though these would not be ready in time for the planned invasion of the Philippines. In the aftermath, some Marine and Army officers questioned whether the operation had been worth the cost in American lives. Still, the Wildcats were soon transferred to Peleliu to assist the Marines in finishing the campaign. The USS Tennessee would go on to see further combat in several major battles, including Leyte Gulf, Surigao Strait, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. Eventually, she was sold for scrap in 1959. She remains one of the few U.S. Navy ships to have participated in nearly every major Pacific campaign. From the attack on Pearl Harbor to the final Japanese defense at Okinawa, the Marines pushed ashore, while the USS Tennessee remained just off the coast, offering vital support throughout the battle. At Tarawa, while the Leathernecks fought inland, the Tennessee would slip away from the combat zone at night to avoid the threat of enemy submarines. Even so, she continued to provide anti-aircraft coverage and direct fire whenever the Marines requested it. During the fighting, she successfully engaged a Japanese submarine and sank it. In January 1944, before moving toward the Marshall Islands, she was repainted in dazzled camouflage, a pattern designed to confuse enemy targeting. Once in position, near the Kwailine Atoll, the Tennessee joined the bombardment effort, targeting enemy bunkers, tunnels, and defensive structures along the shoreline. She also sent out float planes to scout hidden positions, which were then shelled with precision. This support proved essential, softening the defenses and allowing the Marines to push deeper into the jungle with less opposition. When the attack was secured, the Tennessee proceeded to another island, where she again led the preliminary bombardment with other Navy vessels. Her secondary guns helped guide assault craft by setting up marker buoys, while her main batteries continued their barrages until late February, leaving much of the island in ruins. By March 1944, she was reassigned to the Bismarck Archipelago, where she took part in attacks against Japanese strongholds. In June, the Tennessee arrived at the Mariana Islands for the Battle of Saipan. Her main guns unleashed heavy fire against Japanese beach defenses, suppressing artillery and mortar positions, and covering the minesweepers, clearing a path for the landing forces. As the Marines secured Saipan, Tennessee was sent to aid in the assault on Tinian and Guam. Along with other Navy ships, she began firing from about 2,500 yards offshore, protecting the Marines as they landed. Together with the USS California, the Tennessee launched over 500 rounds into Tinian Town, forcing the Japanese defenders to withdraw into fortified tunnel systems. After a brief stop to refuel, the Tennessee steamed toward the Palau Islands to participate in Operation Forager and Operation Stalemate. The goal was to take control of two key islands in order to construct airfields for B-24 bombers to strike the Philippines. The task of capturing Peleliu fell to the 1st Marine Division, while Angaur was assigned to the 81st Infantry Division, known as the Wildcats. On September 16, 1944, the Marines landed on Peleliu, where they encountered fierce resistance from Colonel Kunio Nakagawa's force of 11,000 Japanese soldiers. The fighting was brutal and cost the Marines dearly, but they pressed forward. The next day, the Wildcats launched their assault on Angaur after a sustained naval bombardment by the Tennessee, the USS Pennsylvania, several destroyers, and cruisers. The American force of over 10,000 troops faced a smaller but seasoned Japanese contingent of about 1,400 soldiers under Lieutenant General Sadai Inoue and Major Ashio Goto. These defenders had fought previously in Manchuria and were prepared to resist to the very end. Before the battle began, Major General Paul J. Mueller addressed his men, reminding them of the gravity of their mission and the responsibility they carried. Major Goto had deployed most of his resources to the beaches, expecting that's where the Americans would land. As the Tennessee's guns tore into the shoreline, the Wildcats disembarked with little trouble, but once they advanced inland, they encountered determined opposition. Though outnumbered, the Japanese defenders fought back fiercely. However, without sufficient supplies or reinforcements, they were unable to sustain a strong counter-offensive. The Tennessee continued to provide reliable fire support as the battle progressed. War correspondent John Walker later described hearing the thunderous blasts of the ship's main guns and the sound of shells slicing through the air. From the beaches, observers watched the warships wrapped in smoke and flame as they hammered enemy positions. By September 20th, Angaur was secured, and the Tennessee was able to withdraw for refueling. American forces quickly began constructing the airfields they had fought so hard to secure, though they weren't completed in time to support the invasion of the Philippines. In the aftermath, many military leaders debated whether the operation had been worth the casualties, with some arguing that the objectives could have been achieved through less costly means. Regardless, the Wildcats were soon moved to Peleliu to reinforce the Marines in the ongoing fight there. The USS Tennessee would continue her service in the Pacific, taking part in later battles at Leyte Gulf, Surigao Strait, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. After the war, she remained in service for some time before being sold for scrap in 1959. Her combat record stands among the most extensive of any U.S. Navy ship during the Pacific Campaign, having seen action from the attack on Pearl Harbor.